Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day so far and welcome to today's video, which is going to be all about my 2023 favorites, my best of 2023. I did a top 25 of 2023 last year, quite the tongue twister. I will be doing it again this year, but at the moment what I want to do is look back, go back in time, if you will, and look at the products that I included in my top 25 of last year and share my thoughts on where they are now. Do I still use them? Do I still love them? Have I learned anything new about them? Are they holding up against the products that I found in 2024? Did they stand the test of time? We're going to find out today. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay, so to start off, I want to talk about the 3 products that are on my list of top 25 from last year, but I no longer have in my collection so that I don't forget them. There's no other reason than that. So first off, the Rare Beauty Brow Gel. This is still solidly my holy grail brow gel. The reason it's not here is because I have run out of my current one. It caught me off guard. The one thing I don't love about it is how quickly I use it up, and it went in the bin, and my replacement, which has already been ordered from Space NK, hasn't arrived yet. I love this. I had to use my Benefit Brow Gel today and I tried to gaslight myself into believing it was as good, and I hate the way my brows look today. It's nowhere near as good. I cannot be without the Rare Beauty Brow Gel ever again. That has solidly stood the test of time. It is still my holy grail brow gel. Tick, tick, tick. I flipping love it. And then we have 2 mascaras, the Huda One Coat Wow Mascara and the Benefit Fanfest. Now I do like both of these mascaras. I used both of them up. I think if you watched my empties video, you would already know how I feel about these mascaras. I used both of them up, so it wasn't like I used them a few times and then moved on. I did fully use and enjoy them, but ultimately went back to other mascaras and other mascaras that I just love more than those 2, the Charlotte Tilbury, the Benefit Roller Lash, the Lisa Eldridge, the Hourglass, you know my favourite mascaras. Those 2 were good, but they weren't great enough to make it into like a repurchasing situation. Okay, and the rest of the products I have on my desk in front of me, and what a flipping joy they are to behold all together in one place. Next, the Dior Concealer. Now, when I was looking at this list, it really gets you thinking back about how you felt about products when you first tried them. And I know I loved this concealer. I don't use it that much, I found. This is one that, based on, you know, sort of considering these products, I'm going to pick this back up and start using it again. I don't know why I sort of stopped. Probably I do know why, because the other concealer we're going to talk about in a moment. And yeah, this one is just a little different to the rest of my concealers. It's got that more hydrating, luminous finish. And I think just maybe as time went by, I went back to old habits and just leaning towards my other the word I'm searching for is concealer. I almost said foundation, then mascara for some reason. Concealer is what we're talking about currently, mate. Get with the program. So yeah, I do like it. Nothing has happened. I just don't find myself reaching for it that much, but I'm going to pick it back up. I'm going to put it on my desk right now after I filmed this video and try to rediscover what I loved about it, because I do know that I like how light and hydrating it feels under my eyes, and it has a decent coverage. Perhaps just the finish over time I didn't enjoy as much as my more matte concealers, which is typically what I prefer. So the other 2 concealers that I had in my top 25 were the Haus Labs. You obviously know how I feel about this one. I actually used a whole tube of the Haus Labs concealer up this year, which is unheard of. I can't even remember having done that ever before. I love this concealer. It's my holy grail. The perfect coverage, higher coverage I think than the Dior, smoother, more flattering because it has a more matte finish, very long wearing, love it. This has absolutely stood the test of time. It's still my holy grail a year later, which is very impressive. The Tom Ford Stick Concealer, this has only really grown over time. This took a lot of getting used to for me because it's a stick and it's just not my preferred formulation. I prefer a liquid concealer with a doe foot, but this, I just love this for travel. You know, you don't really need to set it. You don't need a brush or a sponge to blend it in. You can just tap a little bit in, and when you use it really lightly, I love this. I think it's beautiful, very smooth, very long wearing, great coverage, easy going, you know, for touch-ups, things like that. So I actually think I like this more than I did when I filmed my 2023 favourites. Next up, let's talk about the Hermes Bronzers. I don't know what happened here. I think I love the formula, but the shades are just not quite right. I think they're either too warm or a bit too deep, or just quite orangey, a lot of them. So of course they are ridiculously priced, which doesn't help them. And they have a very strong Parma Violet fragrance, which I love a Parma Violet, just not necessarily with my bronzer, you know, more so in a packet as a treat, as opposed to on my face so much. So yeah, there's a lot to like about them. I don't think they stood up against this year's bronzers, I will say that. You know, there's a lot of bronzers, great bronzers came out this year, and these have very much worked their way out of my top drawer and into the also rans drawer. So yeah, these did not stand up over 2024's releases. They were very much bumped right down the pecking order. Next up, Lisa Eldridge's eyeliners. I can't believe these came out last year. I feel like these were this year, but regardless of when they came out, I can't be without them. I absolutely love them, especially Ground Coffee, which I'm wearing today in my waterline. It's just the ultimate perfect smoky, rich brown liner. It's soft, but still intense. I love this liner. It's my favorite ever eyeliner. It actually, you know, got me wearing eyeliner, which I really never used to do. So they absolutely have held up for a year, still use them frequently and love them. Next, we have the Tom Ford Gran Paradis highlighter. This was always a bit of a sort of like as opposed to a love for me. I do enjoy it. It is quite intense for my preference, so it's not a sort of top drawer, still hanging in like my top few favorites of highlighter. I definitely think we've had quite a few highlighters out this year that I've preferred to this one and that were more my kind of highlighter, a bit more luminous and natural than this one. So this one does not get a lot of use, but it still is a pretty highlighter, just not one of my all-time favorites. I would say the Guerlain highlighter, so this is the Terracotta Luminizers. I do still really like these. These are a little more sort of my kind of highlighter, but still quite intense. I love the packaging of these, by the way, really beautiful. Again, not one that's sort of held up. I think, you know, I preferred the Guerlain to the Tom Ford last year, but I do feel like this year we've had a lot of highlighters and those two are very much sort of gone and forgotten about. I think in the grand scheme of things, they didn't have the lasting power. They weren't special enough to really stand out once a few came out after them. However, one highlighter that absolutely did stand the test of time and still stands out now as like my all-time dreamy favorite is the Symbols highlighter. This is in the Precious Coral shade. Probably, I think, my all-time favorite #1 highlighter. It's just so much more subtle. I'm actually going to build that up as opposed to the other two before, which I sort of blended out to show you. This is just, it's perfect. I love it so much. It's so pretty. You know, in winter, this gives me a bit of a blush as well. And in summer, it's just the most stunning, perfect highlighter. So beautiful, beautiful to look at with the gorgeous camellia flower in there, but just on the cheeks, it's so elegant and pretty and refined. It's still one I reach for constantly. It's absolutely held up. It's probably my all-time favorite. Really, its only competitor is the Rev de Camellia, and they're very, you know, neck and neck, just depending on my mood, but I am never disappointed. Whenever I use that, I think, why have I ever used another highlighter, you know? So that one absolutely held up. Now we next have the Chanel Fantaisie blush, which looks an utter mess for me now. This was probably the first and maybe last quite pink blush that I have ever really enjoyed. I know this was limited edition, long gone now, and lots of people missed out on this one and were very sad about that. This is just, for me, what Chanel does better than anyone else. These glowing blushes with that beautiful sheeny finish. It is quite pink for me, so I have to really be in a specific mood to want to go as pink as this with my blush, but it remains in my top drawer, which for a pink blush is unheard of. Okay, I just love the finish. It's so pretty and soft, and it's not sort of, I think on the cheek it actually kind of goes quite corally, leans quite corally on me, so that's, I guess, why I prefer it to sort of a pastel Barbie pink, which would be my nightmare. So yeah, that one has stood up, even though it's not really my typical preference, and I'm still using it a year later. Something that really surprised me when I saw it written down here was the Pat McGrath Velvet Liaisons palette. I was just really surprised that I really don't use this anymore, because I know how much I love this. It's obviously very boring, but does that job so well. And I think what sort of stopped me using this so much this year and loving this so much this year was the arrival of like the 6 Natasha Denona palettes that sort of do this same job, but with shimmers as well as mattes. So I think this sort of got gazumped by, you know, I need a nude, I need a warm, I need a break, whatever else I needed, I can't remember. But there were a lot of Natasha Denona neutral leaning sort of palettes this year, those midi-sized palettes, and they also have shimmers, so they kind of call my name a bit more often than an all matte palette. I still love this palette. I still think it does, you know, matte everyday, no makeup beautifully. Again, one I'm going to start picking back up again, because I really loved this, and I think the tones are so perfect, but it did get a lot of competition this year, so it has been sadly a little bit forgotten. Not so the Natasha Denona INAN palette. I mean, this has so many huge big dips in it that I'm using it still now so much. It has got some competition from its own hand in the I Need a Warm palette, the gold palette. You know, there's been a few other palettes that sort of also really tickle my pickle this year from Natasha Denona, but this one absolutely competes. I still use it a lot and love it a lot, and you can really tell there are a lot of very used and dented pans in here, which is again quite special in my collection. I love her just as much as I did this time last year. Next interesting one, this is YSL's Stora Dolls, and this is the number 100 in the beautiful mini clutch couture format. I love this palette. I think it's gorgeous, really beautiful. It did slightly get beaten to the punch this year by the new Colour Story number 710, which is the slightly peachier version of this. I love this palette. It's so simple but effective, so like show-stopping, but still sort of softer and more elegant. I love this packaging. This one, as you may know if you watch one of my videos, the pan has like come loose and falls out, so that, you can hear it, is loose in there, so maybe that doesn't help it so much, but I think it's beautiful. It doesn't get as much love as it should. Another product that I'm going to put in my pile to use this week, because I love it still, and it has, you know, got some competition again in a different Colour Story, same format, but 100 Stora Dolls was the one that started it all, and I think it's still gorgeous today. The original Charlotte Tilbury Beautyverse palette. I love this. I haven't used it as much as I should. Again, I think it's because it's not sort of a very clear, concise colour story. It's kind of got a bit of everything. So I think when I'm getting ready in the morning and I think, you know, what do I want to do? Do I want something neutral? Do I want something matte? Do I want something really intense? Do I want something plummy or green. It's not the palette that immediately springs to mind in any specific category because it's kind of got a bit of everything. It's a bit all over the place with the colour story. But the formulas, I mean, just swatching them now, they're beautiful. So it kind of gets a bit forgotten in my very large collection, but it's so beautiful. I definitely prefer this to the Beautyverse Love palette as far as the colour story. This is lighter and just suits me and my skin tone better, I think, and my preferences. Another one I need to use more than I do. Next up, we have the Huda Beauty Pretty Grunge palette, which I can open. I knew it. Now, I have used this, but really not a lot this year. It's definitely fallen by the wayside. I think it is just dark. I think this is a brilliant palette, colour story wise, formula wise, fantastic. I don't love the creamy, you know, shadow being in here, but that's a personal thing. It's just not makeup that I do very often. I think if you love a grungier, darker, richer, deeper eyeshadow look, the formulas in here are great. The colour story is great. Everything was beautiful. It's just not a colour story I wear very often. And of course, this year, the Icy Nude palette came out and I love that one so much more than this one. I think that one smashed this one out of the park. I also think some of the shadows in here, these sort of marbled shadows, I didn't love in here. I think the sort of wetter look shadows were also a bit crumblier in this palette than they are in the Icy Nude. So I definitely think Huda did her best work ever with the Icy Nude and knocked this one out of the park. I still think this is a good palette. It's just not my preference when it comes to a colour story. It's a bit too scary for me, a bit too intimidating. So I don't use it a lot, but I think it was a great palette if you are more into a grungier look than me. Oh, the Lancôme Louvre palette. I love this palette so much. This is quite a frequently used palette for a one and done look for me. I love the highlighter in here so much. I wish you could buy just the highlighter because it's so pretty. Just what I like, you know, quite impactful, but very smooth and glossy, not shimmery, which I love. The packaging is delightful and I just love using these three on the bottom row, perfect one and done softer eyeshadows. I really love them. I don't use the green as often because, you know, that's rather colourful for one such as myself who's very, very boring, but when I'm in the mood, it's such a beautiful, clever palette. I love it so much, and it's definitely a piece that I sort of treasure and really love pulling out. I try not to use it so much because it was obviously limited edition, so I'm a bit scared to pull it out on my channel, but for my own personal use, I do pull that one out quite often. Xenon from Natasha Denona. Again, opening this and looking at it now, I instantly want to use this. I think this is so different and unique, and especially in my collection, this is not a colour story I have a lot of. Obviously it's quite scary, but some of these shadows just absolutely scream my name. The formulas in here are so intense, the shimmers especially, so intense and impactful. And when I'm in the mood for this kind of colour story, I don't think anyone's ever done this, you know, better than Natasha. These really cool, silvery, icy blues, definitely giving Huda's Icy Nude a run for its money. I think I would probably prefer the formulas in here, but I think maybe the Icy Nude palette from Huda is more wearable more frequently for me. This is, you know, when I'm in the mood for something out there, something challenging for me and, you know, quite different, I would lean towards this, but I feel like the Icy Nude is a more wearable version of this kind of colour story for me. But wow, the shadows in here are absolutely out of this world. I'm using this week, that's it. I forgot quite how stunning it was. I think, again, in my mind, when I think of the Xenon palette in the morning, when I'm considering what palette I'm going to reach for today, I think of this as being, oh, New Year's Eve only for me, but actually looking at it now, I just want to get involved with it. I want to wear it right now. So I need to remember it's there. I can do it. I can use it. It's not so scary, or it is scary. but it's not so unwearable as perhaps in my mind I remember it being. There's some really actually quite wearable shades in there, but obviously a lot of it is very, very cool, very icy, very smoky, but oof, glorious at the same time. Next up, the Prada foundation. This was one that I really enjoyed it when it came out. Then it kind of went a little bit on the back burner. And now it is back with a vengeance to being a love more than ever before. I've really come to appreciate this foundation. Probably in the last 6 months, it's really gone right back into my very frequent rotation. This made it into my top 3 foundations when I did my top 3 in every category video. It's very polished. That's the word that describes it best for me. Beautiful, natural, medium coverage, gorgeous polished luminosity to the finish, beautiful shades, love the packaging, really love how it wears and how it looks on the skin, very flattering for more mature skin, absolutely still in my top favourite foundations drawer and very much still a love. An interesting one, the Victoria Beckham Contour Stylus. This is still going, this is my original one, but this just goes to show how infrequently I contour. It still remains undefeated when it comes to like a nose contour, purely because of the shape and size is so easy, and it is a gorgeous contour. I do think the contours from Dior, the stick contours this year, are better than this, a lot better value for money, that's for sure. Definitely trickier to use on the nose, but typically I don't do a nose contour, that's too scary for me anyway. I just use them on the cheeks and around the forehead. So I like this still. I think the problem as ever is the amount of product that you get for your money just really doesn't make it something I would probably repurchase, especially as I really don't contour that often. Next we have NARS's holiday palette from last year. I've barely touched this. I think these are beautiful. They are really gorgeous, but I think they're really most suited to someone who has less makeup than I do, because it just gets so lost in my collection. The shades are gorgeous. I think this colour story wasn't necessarily my favourite that they've ever done. You know, there's definitely a couple of shades in here that I won't use, and don't love the shade of this highlighter. I don't think it was my favourite of their colour stories, and the packaging wasn't my favourite. I think this year's palettes look much more up my street. I don't think, have we got them here yet? I think we have got them here now. Hopefully I'll get my hands on one to really try it out, but I think that one is very forgettable among everything else that comes out, particularly when we look at the Hourglass palettes, for example. I think because these just have blushes and maybe a highlighter depending on your skin tone, I just never reach for these. These are very easy for me to forget, and if I want to use a face palette, I'm always going to reach for the Hourglass over the NARS because they have everything I need, not just blush. Next we have the Hourglass Skin Tint, is it? Hydrating Skin Tint. This is still an absolute love, probably my favourite ever tinted moisturiser, kind of alongside the Lisa Eldridge. Those two are neck and neck, but I kind of see them differently. The Lisa Eldridge is much more natural, barely there skin tint. This is more of a tinted moisturiser where it has the sort of hydrating moisturising qualities and a bit more coverage. So it really just depends which I prefer depending on the day and the circumstances, but this is still in my top drawer. I use it all of the time when I'm looking for that kind of product. Beautiful, does what it says on the tin, light, natural coverage, wears beautifully, feels gorgeous, gorgeous glow to the skin, perfect summer product. The Charlotte Tilbury Matte Beauty blush ones definitely don't get as much love from me as I feel they deserve. You know why? Because they're a liquid blush, and as much as I try to use them, I just don't very often. I think these are so good. They are probably the longest wearing cream or liquid blushes I've ever encountered. This is the Pillow Talk shade. It's beautiful, perfect sort of neutral blush shade, but I really very rarely reach for these, and that's just down to my personal preference for powder. They didn't quite change me enough to get into my really frequent everyday use. I kind of had to make myself use them, not because there's anything wrong with them, just like I said, my personal preferences for powders. And finally, last year's Hourglass holiday palettes. I got all three of these. I definitely think, despite ridiculous competition from this year's palettes, these have really held up for me. I still reach for these more so than any other year's Hourglass holiday palettes, and I mean the 2024 palettes really have knocked my socks off. They are without doubt my favourites ever. But I still quite regularly reach for the leopard palette. That's, I think, become the one that I use the most out of last year's palettes. It's so beautiful and it's just perfect for my preferences and my skin tone. You know, you've got 3 blushes in there. That's when they really get it right for me. When they go with more blush, less finishing powder, it's just, oh, that's what I love. I love a 3 blush from Hourglass, and that's what this has. They're beautiful. One of my favorite blushes in here, what is the name of her? Iridescent Rose. So soft and sheeny. Absolutely stunning. I mean, these are really my colors. In here as well, it has Mood Exposure, which is one of my favorite singles from Hourglass. It's just all around perfect. I mean, Jellyfish as well. It's a bit light for me in a couple of areas. The finishing powder's really, really light. And the highlighter as well from that palette, quite sort of icy on my skin tone. But again, I still reach for Jellyfish and Leopard, even now that the, you know, 2024 palettes are here, and I love them. And I would say I think they're better, but they definitely hold up. You know, if you don't have huge amounts of makeup and you buy one of these, I think you will use the life out of it and you'll be absolutely chuffed with them. I just don't think you can be disappointed. I love them so much and I still use them now, even though 3 more have come into my life. And there you are. Those were my top 25 of 2023. Very interesting. I feel like some of these products just didn't stand the test of time. You know, they've very much fallen by the wayside and kind of been forgotten about. Others that really have been still favourites, are still favourites now and still will be favourite into 2025, I think. So real mixed bag, very interesting to see and to consider these products. It's definitely given me some food for thought. It's definitely given me a list of products I want to use this week and remember and get back into using them again. So I really enjoyed this. I feel like this was really helpful. I really hope it inspired you as well. If you have some of these products you haven't thought about or used for a while, I really hope it got you thinking about pulling some older products back out and remembering how great they are and how much you love using them. It's definitely done it for me. I've got sort of 6 products here that I am putting immediately on my face tomorrow. So hopefully it gave you some of the same inspiration to root through your drawers. Let me know, as always, in the comments section if it did, all of your thoughts. Are you surprised? Was this kind of how you were thinking I was using these products? Let me know all of your thoughts. But thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and I would love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye 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 bye.